My name is Samantha Silker. I'm the Director of Operations at the University of Minnesota's Center for Integrative Leadership, and also serve as really the Program Director for the Minnesota Young American Leaders Program. And I'd like to introduce my colleague here, let him introduce himself, who's also presenting on the webinar today.
Thanks, Samantha. Hello, everyone. My name is Abdurrahman Abdulaziz. I usually go by Abdulaziz, and I'm the Itasca Project Coordinator, really helping to drive execution across all project initiatives, as well as kind of managing the stakeholder ecosystem. And with MYALP YALP, we are the greater MSP selection coordinators.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. All right. I'm assuming everyone can see this, and I will go from there. So you all are attending an informational webinar focused on the Minnesota and National Young American Leaders Program, specifically for the Minneapolis-St. Paul participants who are interested. And so during this next half hour, we'll be really giving you a program overview. There's a lot of similarities between the programs, but some differences as well. And so helping parse that out. We'll be talking about who should apply, some of the qualifications, the process for nominations and applications, some of the alumni, and then making sure to save ample time for questions and answer for Q&A as well. All right, so I'll get us started. We're going to start with the Minnesota Young American Leaders Program. As I said when I introduced myself, I really serve as that program director for the Minnesota Young American Leaders Program. And for shorthand, we call it MYALP, MYALP. And really always good to pronounce it. Really the focus of the program is there's kind of 4 areas. Really, it's focusing on building connections and expanding that network of leaders across the state and across your city and region. Second, focusing on the national and regional economic development and what's kind of taking place in the state of Minnesota and how that compares with what's taking place across the nation. Really getting into the third area would be really skills and capacity building. Looking at examples of and tools for cross-sector innovation, cross-sector leadership, and how that can be challenging and create opportunities. And then there's a 4th piece there that's really working with other program participants along with alumni to develop these project ideas that you can bring back to your community and work on something good for the region with support from our university. So a few other things. The Minnesota Young American Leaders Program, we share a number of themes and select faculty with Harvard Business School, who puts on the National Young American Leaders Program. And we launched MYALP in 2019 through a partnership with Harvard, as well as the Itasca Project, which Abdulaziz is representing here today. And that really kicked off MYALP, which is the only statewide version of the national program. So something that we're quite proud about there. And then just a little bit of the logistics. MYALP takes place in May each year. You can see the dates here. It's the 17th to the 20th in 2026. It takes place at the University of Minnesota's campus. And it's really a small cohort of leaders from across the state, 42 to be exact, with cohorts of 12 coming from Minneapolis-St. Paul, which you all are on the call today, and then smaller cohorts from the greater Minnesota areas with 6 from each of their cities. And one more slide for me before I pass it over for the national program. There are some pre and post expectations, an orientation ahead of time, some readings. This is offered at a graduate level at universities. And so we have some readings that you need to be prepared for, and then opportunities to gather with your cohorts and alumni. And then there's opportunities afterwards, which we can talk further about. And no cost to attend all of this. All of it is covered through our sponsors. So I've lost track of my slides. I keep thinking I'm going to pass it over to you, Abdulaziz. But I will say, as Abdulaziz shared, the Itasca Project is a selection partner for Minneapolis-St. Paul, both for the Minnesota version of the program as well as the national. But I do want to highlight other selection partners that we have across the state. And so we really work within each of those communities with a selection partner to help identify candidates and other leaders and have them selected. All right, now over to you, Abdulaziz, to talk about the national program.
Thanks, Samantha. Yeah, so just for some background context, the National Young American Leadership Program launched in 2015 out of Harvard's U.S. Competitiveness Projects and convenes every June at Harvard Business School. YALP brings together 10 leaders from 14 cities across the country for an immersive 4-day experience, kind of centered on case studies and problem solving sessions, really centered on topics such as Gen AI, education, healthcare, and the local and national economy. I think one thing I'll highlight, which kind of just seems like all three bullet points kind of mix in one, you get this really unique experience of not just kind of prepping with the case studies before you attend HBS, but then when you get there and you're going through the problem solving sessions, the individuals that are named or has even brought up the change in the innovation, they attend those sessions and they later tell you how it actually ended up unfolding. Did it work? Did it not work? Where did that put our cities today? Does it strengthen our cities? And then it really kind of also mixed in this idea of personal lessons about collaborative leadership. What does leadership means? What does it mean to take a risk and be innovative? And so it kind of really mixes together these three bullet points that you're seeing on the screen for a real like deep immersive experience that's not just like personal, but also impacts locally. And so I think kind of at the bottom of the screen, you're seeing it says opportunities for city teams to apply ideas to their hometown. I really say it's more so like bringing home national insights to drive local impact. It's kind of the background for the National YELP program. Next slide. Awesome. And then for some of the logistics, as I mentioned, it's an immersive 4-day experience, and it will be at HBS in Boston. And then for the participants, it is 10 participants from each of the 14 cities. So you have a total of 140 participants across the 14 cities. And then below are some of the cities that participate listed. Yeah, and then some of the pre-program logistics also includes having the orientation for folks that are selected to attend, as well as the alumni reception for when folks come back to kind of get connected to the larger web of alumni base that we have. And similar to the MYALP program, there's no cost to attend the program. All food, lodging, and everything else is kind of taken care of and is covered by the program.
All right, so now we'll get into a little bit more of the meat of the content. And thank you, David. We've got some staff off screen, David and Elise, that are monitoring any questions that you have, and so feel free to post those. You can use the Q&A feature or the chat feature for that, and we'll try to address them live or else give you resources for that. And so again, don't feel like you have to wait till the end. You can start posting them now if questions do come up. So one of the big questions or big pieces to address is who should apply? Who's this program for? And what type of leaders are we looking for? And so there's a lot of obviously content on the screen and on the website. But it's really designed for individuals who have enough experience kind of already leading, either within an organization or across organizations, and do have some either positional or reputational authority, but then really have kind of this runway or still have a lot of their career left to be able to be a part of this experience and take these skills and these networks and apply that to the work that they're doing and still has quite a bit of trajectory left. I think I'll name it. I think the name and having young in there in the Young American Leaders Program, I think can throw people off if they're thinking from an age chronologically. But we're really thinking that from a lifespan of your career. And so wanting to have some established career already, but then you're still kind of the whole trajectory of your career, have a lot of career left to be able to apply all of this. I'll add that when we're selecting and when we're looking for leaders, we're looking at them from across the sectors. And so there's a lot of intentionality with selecting leaders, that they're having a representation across the for-profit, nonprofit, and government or public from an education standpoint. And really having a diverse group of a diverse cohort represented across the sectors, industry, roles, and so many different dimensions. Again, you can see on the screen, really focused on working across sectors. And then as I address, there is no age limit, but it's really, there is a minimum kind of work experience that we're looking for, that we'll talk about in a moment. And I guess we're there right now. So, from a qualification standpoint, I'm not going to read all of this because you can get this off of our website. But it really gets to what we're looking for from having kind of that mid-career leader, not necessarily an early entry-level leader yet, but a minimum of 7 years. And in those 7 years, or more, often many of the people who do apply or do get selected have more than 7 years, but the minimum requirement is 7. But they have experience across a number of different areas. Not required to have it across all of these areas, to be clear. And having, whether you've led teams of 5 or more, led different organizations or cross departmental processes, or have really a formal designation, more than one experience is not necessarily better than all of them. And so I think we've seen in applications, people have feel like they need to fill out, say, I check all of these boxes. And if you do, that's great. List that experience. But if you don't, that's great too. That is fine. It's just having a minimum of at least one of these experiences that you can speak to. And second, I'd say from a qualification standpoint, really having an interest or demonstrated experience. And again, it's an interest or demonstrated. And so maybe you haven't had the opportunity to demonstrate this in your professional or personal life yet, but you have a lot of interest in being able to collaborate across the sectors or work across functions and make time working with other leaders. And you can speak to that in your application. All right. And then the last kind of piece I'll say before switching back to Abdulaziz, because we definitely want to save time for some Q&A, is really just the participation and expectations. I think from the University of Minnesota and Harvard Business School, we probably have some name recognition that these are high quality universities, programs being taught at a graduate course level. And so, as I kind of previewed before, we do have curriculum at that level, and we do ask you all of the participants that are selected to complete readings ahead of time. It's roughly about 30 hours of reading. Some people might go through that quicker or slower, depending maybe the last time you were in the classroom. But it really allows there to be the most robust experience during the classroom portion of the program if you're coming prepared with all of that. All right. I will switch this over, actually. Abdulaziz, do you mind speaking on this slide? I'm just going to take a look at the Q&A here while we're
Of course.
talking here.
Similar to kind of what Samantha said, both really, really high value programs at 2 really prestigious universities, and really just talking about the advantages of like MYALP being an opportunity not only to strengthen connections across our region, but really having a conversation on like where is Minnesota in terms of like our local and our state economies at, what's happening in one region that could benefit to learn from another. And then taking that same concept and applying it on a national level with Yelp and saying, okay, this is an opportunity for me to not just learn what is the gaps that Minnesota is missing that potentially like that Pittsburgh has learned from, that San Jose knows, or just any other cities that are members of Yelp in general, that you can learn from other metropolitan areas. And then it's a really good opportunity to build a national network. And so both programs really prime advantages are really learning about like a regional economy and then building a national network, as well as learning about examples from other cities across the country. Anything you'd add to that, Samantha?
No, I think that was great. I think just being explicit in that those of you on the call and again, this is focused on Minneapolis-St. Paul, you guys have the opportunity to choose in your application if you want to apply to both programs. It's the same selection committee.
Mhm.
And so we do a joint selection. And so you can choose to apply to both, and then the committee will kind of placement based on what they see in your application. Or again, if maybe there's a conflict of dates with one of them, there's a specific interest area or others, you can just select only one of the programs. So that's
Mhm.
really all I'd add. And I will just say I see a few things in the chat or in the Q&A here. And so I'm just going to address them right now. And part of it refers a little bit to the previous slides in making time available outside of your day job to collaborate with other leaders. And I think yep, great, great. So that one really part of the program, it's not a requirement, but it's being open to the idea of doing that as connected to the program. And so whether you go through the national program or the Minnesota version of the program, there
Mhm.
are these project teams that are developed during the program to be able to then take those ideas and continue collaboration afterwards. Now, some of that might be from a very experiential standpoint, and there's nothing, you use it as a learning opportunity, and nothing comes necessarily out of the project, but there's still a lot of value in that. Other teams continue to work on something that they kind of seeded the idea during the program. They continue to work on that. And then at the University of Minnesota, we provide faculty time, graduate students, and occasionally student consultants, student consulting team to help take those ideas to action. And so that's really getting to that you're open to being able to do something like that. That might not come to fruition if that's not kind of how the team and the project plays out, but being able to be open to that and having some experience, maybe doing some
Mhm.
work outside of that.
Can
Anything
I
you add, Abdulaziz, and then I can speak. I see there's a question on education level too. Um,
Yeah, just real briefly, I'll just say it's also based on the interest of the group that gets together. And so, like, if you all work in like the healthcare space, but you're really interested in like K through 12 disparities, or you're really interested in talking about food access and equality, you can really decide what that area is. It could be something you have lots and lots of expertise in, or it could be something where you all collectively have little to no expertise in and say, hey, I'm seeing a problem here, and I would like to think with all these other people in the region that really care deeply about the region is how can we solve this collaboratively together. And so it's really also based on your passions and your interests and the skill sets that you bring together as a collective group. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, just one last question, as I reference just the education level that we'll address, and then again, keep the Q&A coming. We've got a few more slides, and we'll keep answering questions and saving some time
Mhm.
at the end here in the last 10 minutes. Education level wise, we do not have a requirement for that. It really is the 7 years of the work experience. Often, I can speak to often people are coming in with a bachelor's degree. That's probably what we see that's most common, but that's not required. And so we have had participants who don't have any formal education after outside of high school.
Mhm.
I'd say that's probably not as common, but individuals have been selected with that experience. More traditional or non-traditional experiences is maybe getting their degree later. And so maybe some of their work experiences ahead or beforehand, then they maybe get their bachelor's. And then, of course, we have individuals who have their master's degree or maybe have also gone on to a PhD. So I'd say it's all across the board with an education level. It's really that experience and having some of that leadership experience already that we're most looking for. And that can look very different depending on what people's kind of lived experiences with their education. So I'm going to keep moving on. Just for a few other things. And then I'll get back. I do see a few more questions. I'm going to save those for now just so we can get through other materials, but we will make sure to address that. So really getting into the nominations and applications. And actually, I keep talking, but Abdulaziz, this is for you to share if you want to speak on the nominations.
Yeah, real briefly. So just to mention the nomination, we are in our nomination process currently, and we're taking nominations currently. Two things just to highlight: the nominations are not required, and so you can go straight to the application and apply without being nominated, and it does not impact selection into the program. And so those, I would say, those are kind of like the two key things to just mention. So you don't need to be nominated by someone else; you can just go straight to the program, but also nominations are not required and will not impact your selection. But every applicant, which we'll talk about on the next slide, you do have to complete an application to be considered for both the programs, whether or not you were nominated.
Yeah, I'll just add that we see nominations being utilized a lot by individuals who maybe be senior leaders or people who are familiar with the program and want to
Mhm.
share it with others to being like, hey, FYI, I think that you'd be really great at this. You should encourage applying. And so somewhat of an awareness of
Mhm.
the program.
And then applications are due November 20th. So we still have ample time between now and then to get the applications in. And you must complete an application, of course, to be considered for the program. I'll also add that like you don't have to finish it in one sitting, I believe, Samantha. You can work on the application and come back to it. And it's these are kind of some of the information, kind of general contact information that we'll ask, and then you'll be asked to kind of share a little bit in terms of short essay sections regarding your personal professional aspirations, as well as how that combines into what you want your civic leadership journey to be, or kind of just bringing in your own lived experiences, and then kind of and attaching your resume as well. But application will close November 20th, so we have ample time between now and then.
Well, I am going to just answer two questions before we get into the alumni, and then we'll really kind of
Mhm.
wrap up our presentation portion. Um,
Mhm.
yes, we will be sharing slides and a recording afterwards. And so recordings we'll send it in to you all afterwards, but we'll also be posted on our website, so you'll be able to access those. And then as for the question about community leadership versus professional leadership, I think the committee really looks at holistically your experience with leadership. And so depending on the sector that you're coming from, depending on the different experiences you've had, maybe you haven't been able to have as much experience in your professional roles from a community leadership standpoint or other leadership opportunities, but you have engaged in that in other ways, right? And so that's I think we see that sometimes depending on the different sectors that people are working in and the different roles. And so that's really, again, looked holistically about overall
Mhm.
how you're developing those skills, what kind of experiences those are. It does not need to be like solely like you've only done it in work or outside of
Yeah.
that. So,
And I'll just real briefly, it's so
yes.
unique to the point where it's like we have individuals that have a lot of either like community leadership and like professional leadership, and some folks who just started dipping their toe into it and have realized that that also makes a really, really great cohort, right? So it's one of those things where it's like so tricky, and it's like really just put your best foot forward and talk about your experiences, because that will ultimately be what shines through.
It makes for a really robust and rich cohort, but makes
Mhm.
selection very difficult. And
Yes.
so you can see that applications are due in November. We don't announce cohorts really until March,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of review and a lot of work that goes into really curating that cohort because everyone's experience with leadership is so unique.
Mhm.
Um, so we're getting close to the end. So if there's any questions that have not been answered yet, please just continue to put those in the Q&A. And then we're just going to end really with the alumni network. And so I guess Abdulaziz, you want to share on this, and then I'll share some testimonials, and we'll wrap up here.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that Itasca does is really work to integrate the MYALP and YALP community into a lot of the initiatives that we have going on, but really focusing on the connective tissue for cross-sector civic leadership, which is Itasca's like North Star and main focus. And so really we try to have alumni opportunities where not only are folks re-engaging with each other, but if there's opportunity on our sides as well for them to engage, whether that is presenting some of their projects that they've talked about, or finding ways to get them resources and accesses to the leaders that we have that is directly related to the issues that they want to address or talk about. It's a real opportunity for not just more connectivity across our region, but really like sharing in the fact that we're all addressing complex problems together. So I'd say on this front, a large part of it is when do we get together and how do we get together, but also when we get together and we all deeply care about something, how are we like leveraging our resources together to address that?
Well, we're really getting towards the end of the presentation here, and just wanted to share a few testimonials. As you saw on the other side, we've had about 400 leaders from the area of the state of Minnesota that have gone through this program, whether they're going to Minnesota, at the University of Minnesota, or they're going to Boston with Harvard Business School. And so I'm not going to read all of the quotes. You can see that here, and you can see a number of other testimonials on our website. But it's really, we've seen a lot of impact across the alumni with whether that you can see in this quote, shifting mindsets, how you're kind of tackling different problem solving solutions. And I'd say this other quote really is just the information, the thought-provoking discussions, and really think about how people can work collaboratively. And so those are really just different ways of understanding and different ways that people can go about the work that they're doing in this collaborative space.
Mhm.
So we've kind of answered kind of some questions throughout, and there are just a few minutes left. And there's never enough time to answer all these, but we did put some resources. Obviously, you found the information session, so my hope is that you've seen the website as well. But resources are on the screen. But in the few moments that we have left, I don't see any open questions in the Q&A. But perhaps David or Elise, are there any questions that you think that we maybe should address in these last few minutes that haven't been asked by any of the webinar attendees?
Can you just speak briefly about the post-training network, and does it stay active? Is it helpful for people's professional careers? I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a stab at it, and then Abdulaziz, of course. So I think there's two pieces of that, both from the program. Us at the University of Minnesota, we gather participants together a few different times after the program, and we still have participants who participated in 2019 that continue to stay engaged. So there's different kickoff events that we're hosting for the next year's selection. There's different alumni reunions that we're hosting, different opportunities to join kind of projects. So that's kind of really from the program standpoint. There's things kind of throughout the year. But Abdulaziz, do you want to speak to, as a selection partner for Minneapolis-St. Paul, some things that the Itasca Project does to gather leaders and build their networks?
Yeah, I would say it's like a hard question, but kind of a simple question in the sense that like it's really just a relationship rich ecosystem in which we try to bring people together and talk about like what are the most pressing needs of our region and how do we like collectively think about addressing that. So one thing that we do after both MYALP and YALP experiences, we have a gathering here that Itasca Project kind of facilitates where we bring together both cohorts and then we meet them with Itasca leadership. And then the Itasca leadership just asks like, how do we help you like realize this thing that you want to solve? Or how can we greater connect you with other resources that you may need to like kind of execute this project that you're working on. And that leads to like other relationships being grown and other resources kind of being secured. So it's simple in the sense that it's like you're building relationships and then that leads to other opportunities to connect in different ways, but also kind of deciding like, hey, I do care about this and I do want to work on this. And then kind of like seeing where there are resources to connect to those things. And I'd say it's more informal and formal at the same time. So there could be a really unique opportunity where it's like, oh, we're really interested in like the civic landscape of what our region currently looks like now. Let's ask the folks that have been selected as the next generation of leaders for our region and say like, what are their thoughts? And then bring them into kind of our processes and our problem solving of like how we're going to address that issue in our region.
Any last questions? We're just hitting time right now. Any last questions from any of the attendees that are on? Well, I'm not seeing any pop in, and we are at time. So we will really conclude the webinar a moment, but we would just really want to give a huge thank you for all of those who have attended. And maybe if you're not watching this live, you're just going to see this as the recording on our website. Thank you for your interest. And we hope to see your application, or if you're someone who's interested in nominating others, we hope to see those nominations. And all of the information is shared on the screens right now, and we'll follow up with these slides and a copy of the recording as well. So thank you to Abdulaziz for joining me today, and to David and Elise who are behind the scenes. And thank you all. We hope to see you to apply for the program soon.